Good evening. The date is Thursday, January 29th, 2026. Tonight, we turn our attention to the Korean Peninsula, where the established order of the last, half-century is being quietly but very firmly dismantled.
Indeed. What we are witnessing is not just a diplomatic shuffle, it's a hardening of lines. The events of just the last 2 weeks indicate that the era of strategic ambiguity in Northeast Asia is coming to an end.
We are entering a period of direct confrontation, defined by new weapons, new strategies, and certainly new anxieties.
That's a fair way to put it.
Welcome to the deep dive. And I want to maintain that sense of gravity, because the map of the world does look significantly different tonight than it did just a couple of weeks ago.
It's true. Usually geopolitics moves at the speed of a glacier, but every now and then the ice cracks and things can move very, very fast.
And it seems we're in one of those moments. For 70 years, the core assumption was that the American nuclear umbrella was the primary mechanism keeping the peace there.
And as of this month, that umbrella is, it's being folded up and South Korea is building a concrete roof instead.
We are going to unpack that metaphor, because it involves some truly terrifying hardware. We're talking about a missile that weighs as much as a school bus, a raid in South America that has Kim Jong-un looking over his shoulder.
And a new U.S. defense strategy that essentially says to Seoul, here are the keys, you drive.
It's a massive shift. And to navigate it, we're relying on intelligence briefs generated by Stylo News.
Right, and that brings us to our sponsor, ProWave AI. Now, we use Stylo News to prep for this deep dive, but for you, the listener who hasn't used it, this isn't just another news aggregator.
No, this is the consumer interface of what's called Stylo Intel Ops.
Exactly. It is the same software engine that government agencies, military commands, and enterprise risk teams use. It pulls from over 250 sources in 20 different languages, and the AI strips out all the clickbait.
So it gives you what they call a pattern of life analysis. Instead of just seeing one headline, you see the trend line.
And the trend line tonight is pointing straight at the Korean Peninsula. But it's not the usual story. This isn't just North Korea fires a missile into the sea.
No, this time the provocation and the reaction, it feels different.
Yeah.
Walk us through that inciting incident from earlier this month, the so-called drone scare.
It started quietly, early January. Tensions along the DMZ are, they're standard, but the North Korean military command suddenly accused South Korea of flying drones directly over their border villages.
Specifically Ganghwa and Kaepung, I believe.
That's right. Now, border surveillance happens all the time, but Pyongyang claimed these weren't just looking, they were capturing footage.
Capturing footage. That implies targeting data, doesn't it? That's usually the precursor to a strike.
That is exactly how the North interpreted it. Their reaction was kinetic and immediate. They used electronic warfare suites to jam and crash the drones.
And the language they used.
The language was key. In their official statement, they called it unpardonable hysteria.
Unpardonable hysteria. That sounds less like a military report and more like a declaration of emotional intent.
It was designed to escalate. Now, here's where it gets murky. South Korea's president, Lee Jae-myung, immediately issued a denial.
The defense ministry was clear the military was not involved.
Correct. So if the South Korean military didn't send them, who did? Rogue activists, maybe?
That was the South's official suggestion. I mean, civilian activists have sent balloons over the border for years. Drones are just the logical upgrade, right?
Right. And President Lee even offered a joint investigation to prove it wasn't a state-sanctioned act.
Which I assume went over like a lead balloon in Pyongyang.
They refused to even pick up the phone. They just reiterated their hostile two states policy.
And then the missile tests.
And then, just to make sure the message was received, they timed a series of ballistic missile tests to coincide perfectly with President Lee's state visit to China, a diplomatic slap in the face.
So a familiar playbook so far. Provocation, denial, missile test. If we stop there, it would just be another Tuesday on the DMZ.
But we didn't stop there. The Stylo reports from mid-January show a clear shift. The South didn't just file a diplomatic complaint this time. They rolled out something heavy.
Heavy is an understatement. We need to talk about the Hunmu-5.
The monster missile.
That's what they're calling it.
Colloquially, yes, South Korea's been developing this for a while, but the deployment ramped up significantly this January. It's a ballistic missile, but it fits into a very strange category.
It's non-nuclear.
It's non-nuclear, but it carries a warhead weighing between 8 and 9 tons.
I want to pause on that number, 8 tons. Most conventional missiles, like a Tomahawk or even a Russian Iskander, They carry warheads that are, what, half a ton?
Exactly. We are talking about a warhead that is nearly 20 times heavier than standard tactical missiles. You have to understand the physics here. South Korea can't build nukes.
They're signatory to non-proliferation treaties.
Right. So how do you get the destructive power of a tactical nuke without the radiation?
You use gravity.
You use mass and velocity. It is basic Newtonian physics weaponized. When you drop 8 tons of metal from the stratosphere, falling at Mach 10, the kinetic energy upon impact it's cataclysmic.
It doesn't even need explosives. The impact itself just liquefies the ground.
It's a bunker buster on steroids. The design intent isn't to level a city, it's to punch through hundreds of meters of granite. South Korea knows where the North's command centers are.
And where Kim Jong-un's safe rooms are.
Deep underground, the Hunmu-5 is designed to reach them.
That changes the psychology of deterrence entirely, doesn't it?
It does.
Before, the threat was, if you attack us, the Americans will nuke you. Now the threat is, if you attack us, we will bury you in your own bunker within 10 minutes.
Defense Minister An Gi-bok calls it a balance of terror. The doctrine is one of massive retaliation. It's a message to Kim Jong-un. You might have the nuclear button, but we have a sniper rifle pointed at your forehead.
And it weighs 8 tons. Which begs the question, why the sudden rush to deploy this now? The drone incident was the spark, sure, but you don't roll out a strategic asset like this over a few drones.
No, you don't. There's a deeper anxiety in Seoul. And it comes from the intelligence that President Lee himself released on January 21st.
This is about North Korea's production capability.
It is. North Korea isn't just tinkering with nukes anymore. They've industrialized the process. The report said they can produce enough material for 10 to 20 new warheads a year.
10 to 20 annually. That's terrifying math.
Yeah.
In 5 years, that's potentially 100 new warheads. That moves them from a rogue state to a genuine nuclear power.
It changes the entire target list. When you have 5 nukes, you aim them at cities to hold them hostage. When you have 100, you can aim them at military bases, ports, airfields. You can actually fight a tactical nuclear war.
That is the nightmare scenario for the South. But the paranoia isn't one-sided. The reports mention something fascinating about Kim Jong-un's mindset, and it connects, bizarrely, to Venezuela.
It's all about the precedent of decapitation. The U.S. military operation in Venezuela earlier this month, they went in, breached a fortified compound, and extracted President Nicolas Maduro.
A surgical special ops raid.
To remove a hostile head of state from power, and intelligence suggests Kim Jong-un watched that with extreme alarm.
He saw it as a proof of concept.
Exactly. For a dictator, your personal safety is everything. If the Americans can reach into South America and pluck a leader out of his palace, well, the fortress in Pyongyang doesn't feel quite so safe anymore.
Is that why we're seeing the personnel shuffle? The report says he fired 3 senior security officials.
The men responsible for his personal bodyguards. He cleaned house. It's a classic symptom of dictator paranoia. If you fear an external strike, you start suspecting the people standing right behind you.
And he's been seen much more in public with his daughter, Kim Ju-ae. Is that PR or something else?
It's a signal of regime resilience. He's telling the world and his own generals, you can take me out, but the bloodline continues. The Kim dynasty isn't one man, it's an institution.
It de-incentivizes an assassination attempt.
That's the idea.
So everyone is sharpening their knives, the North is cranking out nukes, the South is deploying monster missiles. And then, on January 24th, the U.S. drops its 2026 National Defense Strategy.
And this is the document that formalizes the whole new reality.
I read the summary. The headline feels like a resignation letter from the role of world police.
I wouldn't call it a resignation, more like a promotion to management.
The new strategy explicitly shifts the primary responsibility for deterring North Korea to South Korea.
That is a massive departure. The U.S. forces Korea, the tripwire, was always the main deterrent.
It was. But the U.S. assessment has changed. They look at South Korea's economy, its defense industry, its conscription army, and Washington is saying, you're big enough now to handle your own neighborhood.
So the U.S. moves into a supporting role.
Providing the nuclear umbrella and intelligence, yes, but leaving the conventional fighting to Seoul. Burden sharing is the diplomatic term. And practically, it frees up the U.S. to look at the bigger picture. Because while Seoul is watching the DMZ, Washington is looking at the Arctic and the Golden Dome.
The Golden Dome. It sounds like a casino, but it's $1 trillion missile shield.
$1 trillion over 20 years.
Space-based interceptors, directed energy weapons. The U.S. is preparing for a world where missile threats are ubiquitous, from North Korea, Russia, China. They're building a fortress America.
And this connects to the Arctic base in Greenland, the Pacific expansion.
Precisely. If you look at a globe from the top down, the shortest path for a missile from Russia to the U.S. is over the North Pole. By fortifying Greenland, the U.S. is trying to choke that route.
And Moscow calls it encirclement.
They see it as a noose.
So let's step back. We have the U.S. building a shield. We have South Korea taking the lead on the peninsula. We have North Korea mass-producing nukes. This feels volatile.
Volatile is the right word, because when you have this many moving pieces and this much high-yield weaponry, the margin for error just vanishes.
And there's a historical parallel here that keeps intelligence analysts up at night. You mentioned 1995, the Black Brant scare.
Yes. It's the closest we ever came to accidental nuclear war, and almost nobody was about it. In 1995, Norwegian scientists launched a rocket to study the Northern Lights. Peaceful, scientific. They even notified Russia.
But the notification didn't get to the right desk.
It got lost in the bureaucracy. So when Russian radar operators saw a rocket climbing rapidly, they didn't see science. They saw the trajectory of a U.S. Trident missile launched from a submarine. They thought it was the opening salvo of a nuclear first strike.
And this went all the way to the top.
It did. President Boris Yeltsin actually opened the Cheget, the nuclear briefcase. The launch codes were active in his hands, ready for retaliation. They were minutes, maybe seconds away from a full counterstrike.
Over a weather rocket.
Over a weather rocket. The only reason they didn't launch is that the rocket eventually fell harmlessly into the ocean. The radar operators realized their mistake just in time.
So apply that to 2026. Kim Jong-un is paranoid about a decapitation strike. If he sees a blip on the radar, a test, a stray drone, a glitch, does he wait to verify?
Or does he assume they're coming for him, like they came for Maduro, and press the button? The threshold for panic is so much lower now, and the window to decide is shorter, maybe 5 minutes.
It's a sobering thought, and these ripples are going global. The Iran connection, for example.
Right. Pyongyang threatened to send troops to aid Iran. It's a signal of alliance. But Israel immediately warned that if North Korea gets involved in the Middle East, Israel will retaliate directly against Pyongyang.
So a drone in Korea could trigger a missile from Israel. It's a single interconnected theater of conflict.
And meanwhile, Europe is watching the U.S. withdraw into its Golden Dome and starting to panic. France and the U.K. are openly discussing an independent European deterrent. The whole post-war order is fragmenting.
So what's the sentiment on the ground? How are people in South Korea reacting to this new balance of terror?
It's complex. There's real pride in the Hunmo 5. It's a technological marvel. But there is also deep, deep anxiety.
Anxiety about being the primary target now.
Exactly. Being the tip of the spear is an honor, but it's also the most dangerous place on the battlefield.
And what about Russia, China, and North Korea? Are they a solid block?
You'd think so, but the sources indicate deep mistrust. Beijing thinks Kim is reckless. Moscow is using Pyongyang but sees them as a volatile partner. They're united by a common enemy, but they are not friends.
So for you, the listener, trying to keep track of this,
Yeah.
what should you be watching in the coming weeks?
3 things. First, that drone investigation. Any evidence produced by either side could be a flashpoint.
Second,
The logistics. Watch the U.S. force realignment. If significant numbers of ground troops start leaving the peninsula, the strategy is live.
and third,
The upcoming U.S.-South Korea military exercises. Given Kim's fear of decapitation, his reaction might be more than just a missile test into the sea. He could mobilize his forces, put them on high alert.
and that's when the risk of a 1995-style mistake is highest.
It is a landscape of shifting alliances and high-yield deterrence. It certainly feels like a new front line is opened up.
Indeed. The pieces are moving, and the stakes have rarely been higher.
We're all living in the renovation zone.
Well, on that cheerful note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I want to remind you about the intelligence that powered this conversation. We mentioned Stylo News.
It really is a tool for the informed. You can download the app on your mobile or your computer, and it lets you customize your own personal intelligence briefs. You can track these very topics: nuclear proliferation, the Arctic, Korean politics.
It pulls from hundreds of traditional sources and even social media like X. It's the same engine we use to build this deep dive. You can subscribe and get that AI-powered news on demand at www.stylonews.com.
Knowledge really is the only antidote to anxiety in times like these.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. We hope it brought some clarity to a complex couple of weeks.
And if there are topics you want us to cover in the future, maybe that Golden Dome project. or the situation in Venezuela, send us a request. And follow Stylo News on your social media channels.
Until next time, stay curious and stay informed. Good night.
Good night.